All right, so I want to welcome everybody to the second webinar of the London School of Economics Alumni Association. We have been undergoing several events since 2015 under the Social, Economic and Political Debate Forum, which we call CEP Debate Forum. Today we are hosting this event under the same platform, if you would like. And this platform has been always a knowledge-based discussion platform for topics which are of interest to the Lebanese market and to the Lebanese investors and also to Lebanese civil society at large. So with us today is Mr. Omar El Merehbi, who's the secretary of the London School of Economics Alumni. Omar will be our moderator for today, and he will be introducing both our guests. So I'm going to leave the floor to Omar in the hopes that we can have this total discussion in around 1 hour and 30 minutes tops. Thank you, everyone. Omar, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Tariq. I'd like to welcome Dr. Riad Obegi and Mr. Abdel Latif. For those that don't know, Dr. Obegi is currently the GM and chairman of BankBemo, in addition to the other chairmanships that he's stewarding, such as BankBemo Saudi Faransi in Syria and BankBemo in Luxembourg, in addition to the Obegi group. Dr. Obegi has attained his PhD with a very specific topic that's very interesting. It's going to be the centerpiece of our discussion, which is about credit and risk and about how mortgage certificates can be very beneficial or as a solution for emerging economies or markets such as Lebanon. And this will definitely involve the real estate sector, which Mr. Abdel Latif will then give us his input and opinion on. Sorry, my camera got disconnected, which Mr. Abdel Latif will give us his point of view from an industry expert point of view. Mr. Abdel Latif is the managing director of REDPRO SAL with landmark projects in Beirut and outside of Beirut, from Dawra to Beit Miri. And he will give us, and he has been in the industry for over 30 years. And now he can give us his understanding of what Mr. Obegi is trying to propose as a financial instrument, or more specifically as a banking instrument. Having this said, and I'm not going to prolong the introduction too much, I want to hand over to Dr. Riad so he can begin telling us about his CHO product. But just for clarity for all the audience, that the CHO product is not a BankBemo product. It's an initiative taken by Dr. Obegi himself. Dr. Obegi?
Okay. Thank you, Omar.
Let me also add up that we always have a disclaimer, which we did not talk about today, is that everything that is being discussed here is definitely the ownership of the discussants. So it's not liable for LSE Lebanon Alumni or our employers, if we have to say. So please, Mr. Riad, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Tariq. Thank you, Omar. As we all know, Lebanon is presently in a crisis, a big crisis, and all the pundits are saying we need a large injection of capital. My claim is that capital is abundant, but it is not very well used. Sorry, you hear me well? Because a little bit earlier I was not hearing Omar very well. Is it okay?
We can hear you very well.
Excellent. So the capital is abundant. What we are, the pundits are saying is Lebanon needs an injection of capital, maybe from the IMF of maybe $2 billion per year, and this is necessary. Otherwise, we are broke. Now, before I speak about the solution, let me first make a little digression to talk about the capital. Why is capital necessary? You are all students or ex-students from LSE. Why is capital necessary? Capital is necessary to give confidence. If I have to work with a company that has a capital of $10 million, it's easier for me to work with this company than to work with a company who has a capital of 1 million. And I'm not going necessarily to look into what they are using their capital for. Capital by itself is good to install confidence. So the capital is very important for confidence. Now, what is, when I say that capital is abundant, what I'm talking about? In our estimation, the real estate capital in Lebanon alone, is approximately $1 trillion. Maybe it has gone down a little bit now because of the crisis, but it is still an extremely large amount, much more than what the IMF can inject into Lebanon or whoever can inject. So this is extremely large capital. And the whole question about capital is how to use it efficiently. Now, you have, I was speaking about a company that has a $10 million capital, but if this capital is placed into luxury cars for the CEO, then it's not very useful. So the capital has to be used efficiently in order for it to be not just capital, but also allows the company to progress. And Lebanon is no different. We have this extremely large capital. I said $1 trillion for the real estate, but very unused, underutilized. Now, in order to see the solution, let us take a practical example. Let us say that Tariq is just in front of me now. Tariq has some pieces of real estate that are worth $10 million. Is it okay with you, Tariq?
يا ريت والله.
Ya reit, okay. So you have $10 million of real estate, and you don't want to use to sell them because they are you are attached to them, and maybe you are using them. So you have this $10 million of real estate, and presently you are not doing anything, but you have a project, a very nice project. What can you do presently with the current situation? You go to a bank, you tell this bank, listen, I have this $10 million of real estate. Would you lend me against this collateral? Would you lend me $5 million? If your project is interesting enough, if you have a good reputation, and the real estate is really worth these $10 million, the bank is going to lend you maybe $4 or $5 million for your project. So you have used this $10 million as a capital in order to achieve your project. So your capital of $10 million was profitable. But most people don't have a project. So what do? They can also find somebody who has a project, not their own project, the project of somebody else. They will mortgage their real estate, and the other person is going to borrow maybe the $5 million and pay you, Tariq. They will pay you a fee for that. Maybe they will pay you 1% or 2%. So you are going to be happy because maybe 3%. You'll be happy because your capital has been utilized by somebody else, but you have gained something for you. Again, if not everyone has a project, very few people are ready to trust the projects of others, except if somebody who is very close to them, for example, your son or your father or your brother or somebody who is close to you or your sister. So you will do it for somebody who is very close to you. And so this capital of $10 million, you are going to use it in an efficient way. But as I said, very few do it. So what can you do? If instead of having a capital of $10 million in real estate, if you had this $10 million in cash, you can do the same. First option is to put it in your own project. Second option to lend it to somebody who has a project. But you have a third option, which is to lend it to a bank. Because what does a bank do? It takes money from people who have money but no projects and lend it to people who have projects but no money. This is theoretically the job of banks. Taking money from people who have money but no projects, lending it to people who have projects but no money. Now, what is the advantage for you, Tariq, if you lend it to the bank instead of lending it to individual projects? You have diversification. You have also the capital of the bank that is guaranteeing you, because you don't lose on one project, you lose if the bank goes bankrupt. And also you have the supervision of the central bank who is supervising banks. So this third option is not existing with your real estate capital. The whole idea of the CHO is, well, why not create this third option? How do we create this third option? We are going to create an instrument that we call CHO, but in the law, the draft law, it's not called CHO, but for us, we are calling it CHO. So we create this instrument that is you deposit a mortgage guarantee for the bank to use it to borrow money. So this mortgage guarantee is deposited in a bank. The bank can borrow against a pool of those certificates. There are certificates. It can borrow against a pool of those certificates from another bank, and the risk of the depositor is the bankruptcy of the bank, not anything else. So you are exactly taking the same risk as a cash depositor. The cash depositor loses his money when the bank goes bankrupt, but not if one of the projects, it is only when the bank goes bankrupt. Here it is exactly the same. You deposit this mortgage, this certificate. You deposit it for a period that is below 1 year, 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. You get a fee at the end of the deposit, just as when you are depositing cash. And the bank will be able to borrow more easily, because the bank is just like anybody. If they have collateral, they can borrow more easily. If they can borrow more easily, then they can lend more easily, which is their job, to lend money. So you would be happy. You are getting a fee, whereas before you were not getting a fee. You were not getting the same revenue. You are getting an additional revenue. The bank is happy because it is able to lend more money and therefore to make more money. And the economy is much better because I hope all of you have studied enough economy to know that when the loans from banks go up, the GDP goes up as well. So it will create a growth in the economy that is extremely necessary now. So this is the general idea. Before I continue, I will ask Mr. Kousa to show you a little video that explains it for the general public, this instrument, because as I explained it, it might be only for LSE alumni, but this is for general public.
All right, we look forward, yeah.
Okay, please. No, there is no sound. No sound.
فينا نرجع نعيده بليز.
Maybe we can share the link into the chat.
اوكي هلا المفروض يكون في sound. Yes. I think it's not gonna work for some reason. ما بيطلع الصوت.
We should just share the link of the video on the chat.
Okay, I think we can, if you want, we can continue and then we can run the video if we manage to fix the issue.
So we'll send you the video, you'll see it, and we'll send you the material as well, so you'll see everything.
Perfect.
Dr. Obegi, maybe you can give us a small brief on the video in very basic terms about the idea, not get into the technical.
The idea is, just as I explained, it is telling somebody who is a real estate owner.
Any real estate owner. It could be anybody. It could be anybody. It could be me.
Anybody.
Property in remote areas, or I own apartments in Beirut.
Anything.
And commercial retail, doesn't matter.
Anything.
Okay.
There are conditions. The conditions are, first of all, it has to be clean. So you cannot deposit a certificate for a property that is not really yours, where there is dispute, or that is mortgaged already, or that is not, it is not registered. So it has to be, the deed must be clean and clear. There should not be a previous mortgage, because
so the owners of the 2,400 shares of a real estate property.
Yes, 2,400 shares, absolutely.
Okay. And it could be a joint ownership, just out of curiosity. Can it be
no, it cannot be a joint ownership, but what can be done is that you can create a company, a real estate company that owns the 2,400 shares, and this company makes the deposit.
Agreed. Okay.
So you are, just as with the cash deposit, you are taking less risk in a bank than lending to an individual borrower. And of course, because you are taking less risk, you are taking a fee that is lower than what you would get if you had lent this mortgage to a company or a person. Now, this is the basic process. We have checked a little bit how would people react to that, because we thought yes, maybe people are going to say no, my real estate, I like it, I don't want, etc. So we made we asked people, and the reaction was, we would do it for a secondary, most of the people would do it for a secondary property, but not for our main property, which is logical, because their main property, they consider it is something that is sacred, they don't want to. But for a secondary property, well, it is interesting because they get additional revenue.
So basically, because they consider, from their point of view as real estate owners, they see that there's a high risk in this product. Maybe they don't understand it enough. That's why they're not willing to risk their first property or their primary property.
They think that there is a risk. Of course, there is a risk when you are putting money in the bank. There is a risk, and here it is the same, except that as it is very new, it does not exist. They will tend to be a little bit more cautious than for cash. And of course, in the present situation in Lebanon, they will be even more cautious. Now, is it going to be a tidal wave? We are saying there is $1 trillion of real estate. It's not going to be a tidal wave, because the problem is not going to come from the real estate owners. The problem is going to come from the who I think are going to be asking for much more than what the banks are able to cater for. I'll give you the example of when we opened in Syria, when we opened a bank in Syria, whereas before there were just banks belonging to the state. In the beginning, we were receiving much more deposits than we were able to place, because obviously it takes more time to lend to somebody, because you have to study the person to whom you are lending than taking the deposits. So I would think that in the beginning, this instrument will be very attractive for the depositors and a little bit less for the banks. But there are advantages additional to just lending. One of the advantage is that for some real estate owners, it is not only a question of having additional revenues, it is also the possibility to be bankerized. Think about yourself, Omar, now, that you have a small plot of land that you are cultivating. You are where do you like? You like in the north, in the south?
I'm from the north. I'm going to go with the north.
In the north, okay. So you have this little plot of land that you are cultivating. You really think that a bank is going to come to you and tell you, open an account with us? They are not, because you don't have any cash, so you are not interesting for the bank. And the fact that you are not bankerized is depriving you of a freedom. Working with banks is a freedom. I know the situation today in Lebanon, but still it is a freedom, and it is a basic right for people to have an account in the bank, because they can do a lot of things if they are clients of banks. So bankarization will be more important, especially that Omar, you have a very small plot of land, you are not very rich, but your risk is much lower than for somebody who has a more important asset than you. Why? Because if there is a deposit guarantee, the deposit guarantee applies to the cash and to the real estate, those certificates. Since they are limited, those guarantees, the deposit guarantees, I think that will soon arrive to $50,000 for the deposits. If you have a plot of land that is worth $50,000, you are taking zero risk and you are getting a fee and you are bankerized. Whereas somebody who is putting Tariq, who is very rich, he wants to put $10 million, but he has a guarantee only for $50,000. So you are in a much better position than Tariq, who is covered only for $50,000, and you are covered for the total amount that you have put in the bank. So you are taking less risk, and you have more advantages.
Dr. Obegi, just a small question.
Yes.
So, as a real estate owner, I am giving the CHO agency my real estate property. That in turn, the CHO, where will it get the funding? Will it come from the depositors at the existing bank to lend other entrepreneurs? The cash, where is the cash injection coming from in the process? If I'm handing over to you my property and I'm taking a small fee for this property, where will the funding for a project come from?
It's not the project. You have to look at it from the liability side. Your question is a very good question. Where would the bank get the funding from? From other banks or from financial institutions, because they have a collateral. They are much more in a better situation than before, where they were unsecured. Here they are secured. Plus, a bank that has CHO deposits is safer than a bank which does not have CHO deposits. Why? Because in the case of CHO, you have taken this guarantee, and on the other hand, you have a real estate asset. Whereas a bank that does not have this, it has, on the other side, it does not have assets. It has, or real estate asset that has been evaluated at a very conservative price. It has loans, sometimes loans to the government.
So there is a risk-sharing scheme in this arrangement, basically. So there, the real estate owner will be carrying a portion of the risk, while the bank that's taking the real estate will be carrying the risk with them as well, which also has another macro risk that Mr. Ali will touch on right now.
No, Omar, it is on the liability side. It's not on the asset side. So the real estate owner is taking a risk on the bank. He's not taking a risk on projects.
Exactly. And the bank is taking a risk on the project.
The bank does whatever it wants, just as it is doing presently.
Yeah.
So,
Mr. Ali, would you like to give your point of view on this and touch on the macro aspects of this?
Perhaps if I can add a few things before Ali intervenes. Sorry, Ali, I'm taking a little bit on your time. It is a variant of this, which we call the CHO-PRO, that is necessary in the present situation. Today, the banks have a lot of liquidity. This liquidity is at the central bank, but they don't have enough solvency, because in the provisioning that is required from banks has compelled the banks to they lost part of their capital, which means that even if they have the liquidity, the necessary liquidity, they cannot lend because they don't have the solvency. So this instrument, which we call the CHO-PRO, is a subordinated real estate guarantee, longer term. So this would, if the central bank accepts and issues the necessary regulation, will allow banks to increase their tier 2 capital, which means that they will be able to lend more. And lending more, they will, of course, make more profits, but it will boost the economy in a situation where it is extremely necessary that banks lend money. Sorry, Ali.
No, not at all. Not at all. First, thank you, Tariq and Omar, for including me in this panel with Mr. Obegi. It's a pleasure. Really, I've reviewed a little bit the document that I've received on what Mr. Obegi was explaining, the CHO-PRO and the instrument that he is proposing. Well, in my humble opinion, definitely it's a very good instrument and tool. Maybe it will definitely have a positive impact on the economy on the medium to long run, but it's also one of the good tools for the banks themselves. And Mr. Obegi was saying it himself, that there is no a problem of solvency rather than liquidity with the banks, that this product may help in solving part of this problem. That's number one. Number two, of course, it has many other effects on the banks, such as the reduction of weighted average cost of capital. It may improve their net income. It may improve their return on equity. So for the banks, definitely it's a good product. Although maybe I'm not a banker, but I may have some few question marks to raise and on the technicalities, although I'm sure they have gone through the technicalities in a very detailed way, but some points that I didn't really understand. For example, the 1 year deadline on the deposit of the real estate, and then what after the 1 year expires? What will the bank do? What will be his guarantee again? That's one of such an example that attracted me, attracted my attention to some, maybe I don't want to say flaws, but some points to be revisited maybe in their program. Anyway, what I'm what I want to tackle now is my opinion on the impact or on the possibility of running such a program and such an instrument nowadays from a perspective of a real estate owner or real estate developer. Nowadays, actually, I'm going to quote something that Mr. Obegi said in one of his latest interviews. He stated that banks are trust traders. So the main thing is trust. And nowadays, what we lack most is trust. And we don't want to forget what was happening for the last period and the bad experience that depositors had with the banks. After a few years of some, I want to name things as they are, some fake profit that they were making on high interest due to some financial engineering and so on and so forth. And at the end, they found themselves not even able to reach their money or to be able to use any of their money because of the capital control that prohibited them to use any of their money. So, of course, there's always this mistrust, not only from the banks, honestly, from the whole system. And this is the most important thing. It's mainly the system. And it's the mistrust of this whole management of this country. And unfortunately, if we have a government that is announcing its bankruptcy along with the bankruptcy of their banks, and they are even saying it loud, I'm not sure how people will really trust to deposit their goods, whether money or real estate, with the banks during this period. So there's a huge problem here, which is mainly trust. That's the first thing. Number two, there are some things that are not very clear to me how the banks will be able to deal with if they are to apply this instrument or this product, like the criteria and methodology of valuation and assessment of the value of the properties that they are getting. Knowing that, especially these days, even if we're not talking about this product, if any bank today wants to do evaluation or an assessment of a certain property, I really am not sure. Maybe Mr. Obegi can answer me that. I'm not sure on what basis they can do it. Will they do it on the dollar, on the Lebanese pound, on what? I really don't know. And you know, knowing that some banks, I don't think it's a secret for anyone, they are ready today to give any depositor of cash dollar $2.5 for each, $2.5 for each dollar. Let's call it that way. So with all this happening, it's really, maybe the product can be a great product in good days or in normal days. Let's not say good days, but other also, maybe in my opinion, drawbacks that are related also to the general situation rather than specific bank situation. I know that some banks are unfortunately being maybe there is a misconception towards so many banks. Not all banks, that's my at least opinion and conviction, not all banks have the same length of responsibility of what happened, but the lack of trust reached all, regardless of who did what. So there is also this IMF that Mr. Obegi was mentioning also in his introduction, the IMF conditions. And we all know that the IMF is coming with so many conditions. One of them is the de-dollarization of the deposits and the system. What will happen in that case if I will have deposited my real estate at the bank and then there is this de-dollarization? Will I be affected or not? And in that case, between the de-dollarization at what rate and then the black market rate, so there are so many factors which we know that this is in a way, a haircut, and it's an indirect haircut that we are all witnessing anyway these days, before even the IMF condition that may be applied. So in conclusion, I don't want to be long, then maybe we can debate more on some specific points, but in conclusion, this product for me as a real estate developer for so much, for a long time, and coming from a real estate development family background now also, and knowing or dealing with people on daily basis in this field, I fear that people will look into, actually these days especially, they look into the real estate as their last resort to preserve the value of their money. They even, I think, look at it as if they have this cash that they took from the bank to put it at home, which I think there are billions now at home in the hands of people that are afraid to lose their money. So even in this case, the real estate is even more secure than cash at home, because you know, cash at home can be maybe stolen or burned, but the land or real estate has less chance to be lost. So in such a situation, in such days, I'm afraid I cannot see that this idea may be really marketed until we have a real a change in our condition, which is a long way to go.
So, Mr. Ali, I understand from you the three major points that you have identified. One is the trust that the people in Lebanon don't have towards their banking sector. How will they trust them after everything that is happening with the deposits right now? The second point is on the currency and the structure of this certificate, which Mr. Obegi can tell us about more, because that's a very good point. And I'd like to add also one point, Dr. Obegi, the valuation of the property, which is also linked to Mr. Ali's second point on the currency and the de-dollarization, or if it's going to be an LBP. So maybe you can tell us more.
And also there's an additional factor, if I might add, which Mr. Ali closed with, is the psychological aspect of and the financial aspect of this. I mean, real estate now is actually being considered the last resort. So if you jeopardize it in a way that it becomes a financial product, which is kind of in line with the the crisis that the banking sector is facing, then it would lose its value for the investor. So those are the main points that would be good to tackle. Go ahead.
First of all, I'll talk a little bit about the trust factor. Trust is not something that is binary. Either you trust or you don't trust. It is a spectrum. For example, I can go to my grocery shop and I'll trust this grocery shop to sell me good products, but maybe I will not trust them for him to marry my daughter. So trust is not something that is either yes or no. And today it is true that the trust in banks have gone down a lot, but it doesn't mean it has disappeared completely. Just as it doesn't mean that trust in the state or in the government has disappeared completely. There is still some trust. Otherwise, we would not have about $150 billion in deposits in banks, because they can withdraw Lebanese pounds. So they could have withdrawn everything. And they are not withdrawing everything. And in some banks, quite the contrary, they are receiving deposits from other banks. So it shows that trust has not disappeared completely. And this is number one, but more importantly, it is the fact that if we do this project, it is not for the next year or this year, 2020 or 2021. It is when you make a law, you make it for 50 years, hopefully, maybe for hundreds of years. So we have to look, as you mentioned, the long run. It is you don't do a law for just a year or a few months. Now, I'm very happy that you mentioned me saying that banks are trust traders. It's true. And I think that banks have to do a lot to restore this trust and maybe to go even more, to have even more trust. Because if we want Lebanon to be a financial place, it is not by having this kind of trust. And I think that the government is not helping, because the government is saying every time it goes on the air that there are too many banks and there should be much less deposits, and that they are doing a lousy business. They should not have lent us money. I find this logic a little bit upside down, because if it is true that somebody who has lent money to the government is guilty, then somebody who has paid his taxes also is guilty. And the person who has the Lebanese pound in his pocket is also guilty. I think that the banks are maybe have done things not very correct, but basically banks are good banks. And I'm not talking about our bank, I'm talking the banks in general. And even if 99% of the banks were bad, I don't think it is reason enough to forget about the banks and to liquidate the banks. Now, there are, you asked about the valuation of properties, and I think it is a very important question and a difficult question, and we have worked on that, and we have made a partnership with a company in order to develop a software in order to evaluate in an automatic way properties. Because whereas today, when you are asking an evaluator how much is my property worth, you pay him, let us say $200, $300. He makes an evaluation. But if we are talking about the massive properties, hundreds of thousands of properties, you cannot do it like that. It will cost too much. So we are developing this software. It is almost finished, which will allow to make a massive evaluation of properties. Yes, it is a very, very important question, and it is really the centerpiece of this project. Evaluation, knowing better the real estate. And as I said, draft law, we have draft law in Lebanon. We have a draft law in Lebanon, and one of the member of parliament said at the parliament, one of the good aspects of this project is the fact that there will be more transparency on the real estate. We'll understand better the real estate that we own. So valuation and general knowledge about the properties people own. The currency of the CHO, it does not depend on us. It depends on what the central bank will do. Will they ask for it to be in dollar or in Lebanese pound? We don't know. Personally, I would be more inclined to do it in dollars. But as you mentioned, if the IMF requires that the economy is completely in Lebanese pound, then it does not make sense that it is in dollar. But again, it is not my choice to do. It is the choice of the central bank. And both Tariq and Ali of Omar as well mentioned about the psychological aspect, about the fact that real estate is considered by a lot of people as a last resort saving. It is true, but as I mentioned before, we are talking about $1 trillion, and the banks will certainly not take more than 10 billion. And it would be extraordinary if they take 10 billion. So we are talking about 1%. 1%, I'm sure that there are people who will take the risk for 1% of their assets. So I'm not worrying about that. And I have seen, not only in Lebanon, elsewhere as well, people who say, well, yes, I will take the risk for part of my real estate. And I have seen people In South America, I have seen people in Africa. I have seen people in the Middle East. So I don't think that Lebanese are going to be so different from people elsewhere and say, no, absolutely not. I don't trust at all the banks and I will not put anything. And again, this is something long term. Now, the CHO Pro, it is to improve the tier 2 capital of banks. Let us, Tariq is the wealthiest of us all. Let us say that Tariq owns a bank and he has real estate. And he knows that if his bank goes bankrupt, he will have to pay. So his real estate in Lebanon is already jeopardized. I don't think he would lose anything putting those $10 million that you own as tier 2 for your bank, because it will allow your bank to continue to grow, to prosper, and you are not taking additional risk. So I think that the CHO Pro will work with the owners of the banks.
Dr. Obegi, just to stop at 2 points. One on the CHO, the regular CHO, where you said that the banks can raise up to 10 billion. Just in terms of risk, this 10 billion.
10 billion. 10 billion.
Yes. 10 billion out of the 1 trillion.
Yes.
Market. So this 10 billion, this is going to be the face value of the assets. 10, 8, 5, could be 20. We don't know. It might be a very popular product. But how much lending is given against? What's the value of the certificate in terms of the real estate property? Is it based on a 1-for-1 basis?
Sorry, Omar, I did not hear you very well. Can you repeat your question?
My question is that the face value of the assets that are going to be deposited into this certificate, how much lending is going to be given against this certificate? What's the risk factor? Is it 1 to 3 or 1 to 1, for example? That's the first question. The second question on the CHO Pro, where you said that the real estate would be used to finance the tier 2 capital. The tier 2 capital, if anybody is entering as a financing in the tier 2 capital, will drop in the seniority of the insolvency in case of default. So a depositor, cash depositor, is still safer depositing money in a bank in terms of seniority, rather than giving a tier 2 capital guarantee. Is that correct?
So your first question was the valuation. What is
the collateral?
How much? Sorry. Yes. How much are we going to do?
How much cash? Yeah.
It's not cash. No, it's not cash. We are talking about the guarantee. So if the real estate is worth $10 million, like the real estate of Tariq, how much will he be probably able to put in the bank as CHO? I would guess it will be around 5 million, but it will depend on several things. There is a risk factor. So if there is a lot of volatility on his assets, then probably we'll take a larger, I don't like to use this name, a larger haircut. So there is, as you mentioned, a risk factor that we have to integrate to see how much we take as a discount on his real estate for the guarantee that he's going to issue in favor of the lenders of the bank. This is number one. Number two, it will also depend on the central bank, who is probably going to give directives. It will say probably you can take 50%, as they are doing today. When you are lending money against mortgage, they tell you can take that much collateral. So it will not be different.
Can I interfere a little bit? Yes. First, thank you. First, Mr. Obegi was explaining some points, and he mentioned that deposits are still there. Yes, of course, but as you of course know, Mr. Obegi, the value of deposits went dramatically down. And we all know if it wasn't from the capital control issue, maybe it would have been a disaster. So that's my opinion, at least. Anyway, you mentioned also something, but here I'm not pointing finger on anyone. And again, I'm going to tell you, I do support the banking sector, and it's one of the main private sector a main sector in the private sector, if you want, that has the largest impact on our economy, and we shouldn't at all. I'm not taking the side of the government in declaring bankruptcy of this sector at all. I'm against it 100%. Actually, I'm against the government 100%. But anyway, so now you mentioned that the bank paid government or gave loan to governments. So how can they be guilty while taxpayers, while they were paying their taxes, are not as well guilty? Because, you know, taxpayers, for someone to pay tax, it's mandatory. For bank to lend government, it's optional. And many banks, some of them did not, but many banks took this option because they were sharing the game with the central bank for larger benefits. We want to put things like black on white on the table. And of course you are guilty. You are not you personally, you as sector, you are guilty. And you went with the game, and you went with this game with the central bank, unfortunately. And this is the result now. Now, what's happening is that, of course, you are right, capital is definitely needed to reboost the economy. But you are still searching, like the government, of getting the capital from people. There's another way to get it. There's a much better way to get it. First of all, of course, there's the government that should change its way of management and get the proper people to manage, not the bad people to manage, because this management has been proven to be a very bad management, not to say more. I don't think anyone can disagree on that. And you know, this government has a lot of assets as well. So it's not bankrupt. Neither banks are bankrupt. We all know that. But there is a way to do it rather than every time go to depositors and real estate owners and people in this country for them to have the main role to recapitalize banks and the industry. The industry and the banks and all this country can be recapitalized from the appropriate and proper management of the government, and the banks have a great role to play in this regard. While for real estate, again, I'm going to go back and insist on my opinion on one thing, if you may allow me. Now, Mr. Tariq mentioned the psychological side. Yes, and it's not only psychological. It is more of a proven fact that real estate conserves the best. It's the best way to conserve value of money on the long run. It has been proven all through the years in all countries. Even here, during war, after war, what kept people going is the real estate. So especially these days, as we all know, with all the changes that are happening, the cost of construction that became crazy, and with all the other factors and the dynamics of this economy, the way it's going now, and I don't see that any new development or real estate project will come up soon, not before 10 years minimum, if not more. Anyway, the IMF plan is for 8 years to put things on track again. Well, I'm not sure. And this is from the time of signature. I'm not sure if we're going to sign in 8 years. So all this together, you know, it brings me back to the fact that although I do respect pretty much what you were saying and your conviction of this product and trying to do something to raise capital in such tough days to try to solve the solvency problem and try to lend people again, which is a great thing. But I don't see it coming from this angle or from this product during this period. There are many other things to happen before, and I'm sorry to tell you, but people will wait much longer than you may expect before moving forward or having a step forward towards such an offer. Sorry, but I had to repeat again some of the things I said.
But Mr. Ali, don't you agree with Mr. Obegi that establishing such an instrument can also create a lot of value for the real estate market, where you can have more information about this sector, and given its absence right now, and this can really help you in the future using solid data rather than basing on uncertainties and unknowns. I mean, maybe product has right. A positive aspect to your
of course, it may have this aspect, but what I'm trying to say, Mr. Omar, is that people now, even large developers or large real estate owners, for the time being, this is not their priority, I guess. You know, for the time being, they want to conserve at least the value of what they still have, or what they still have, because what they have in terms of liquidity, I'm not sure if they're going to have it anymore. Anyway, you know, a prime real estate, even in the coming period, it's gonna not only have, it will not only conserve its value. In my humble opinion, it will even improve in value day after day for so many reasons. You know, even with this uncertainty and fluctuation of all the financial factors in the market, people will go more and more towards real estate, where supply is becoming much and much less, by the way, and demand is becoming proportionally higher. I'm not saying very big, but proportionally higher. I want to give you some example. Even I know some developers, in the last couple of months, they even stopped selling. They went reverse cycle. They even paid back their clients who bought from them a certain percentage of their projects. They took them out because they believe that during the coming period, their guarantee will be their real estate rather than the project to sell. So we have to look from the real estate angle, not only from the bank and financial angle. That's all what I'm saying.
Well, Mr. Obegi's product is inclusive of all kinds of real estate available in Lebanon, and that could be a land or an apartment or a villa. It could be whichever.
It could be prime or not prime.
Exactly, and in his product, and given that you are a real estate developer, which actually might play out more in your favor if you bundle the available real estate on hand that you want to preserve and not sell at the moment, and which you are saying will appreciate, and actually receive an income on it for a period of 6 to 12 months.
Against the risk. Against the risk. The risk.
He's giving you a short-term risk. His CHO product, Dr. Obegi, is for less than a year. The maturity is 1 year.
That's my question that I didn't get any answer from Dr. Obegi on it. Is it for a year, and what happens after 1 year? That's a big question, because how will the bank deal with the loan that he gave to other traders?
That risk should be not on the real estate owner. Dr. Obegi? Yes.
As you certainly know, banks manage their assets and liabilities. The deposits they get are less than a year, and they lend sometimes more than a year. What happens after when the deposits matures? Well, they have other deposits. This is why they keep liquidity, and this is why they have they manage in a committee that is called ALCO. Or ALM, Asset and Liability Management. This is what they do, and they do that all the time. So don't worry about what they do after a year. It is their job, and it has been their job for a long time, so they know how to do it. Now, for the mismanagement by the government, I'm not doing politics, so I cannot comment on that. But I agree with Ali. The government has a lot of assets and can make a lot on his assets before taking the money from the people. I totally agree with you. I don't think that the right way is to say, well, we did some bad things, we are going to take from X, Y, and Z. I think that the first thing is to make more out of his assets. But why I think that this is necessary as anything else that can improve things, because there is urgency. I walk to my office every day, and every day I see beggars. And if you walk everywhere, there are beggars everywhere, and there are people who are not even begging because they find it not good for themselves. I think that whatever solution we can find, we have to do it. I don't think we can leave people in this situation. I don't think that it is good from us to leave 50% of the people unemployed. I don't think that we can accept that according to the plan of the government, we are not going to 50% of unemployed, we are going to 70% of unemployed. And this is unacceptable. Whatever we can do to put this country back to work, not giving money to the people, which we should do, but more important is to put the country back to work. And in order to put the country back to work, it is extremely important that banks are able to lend again. Because if the banks don't lend again, there is no activity and people are going to be unemployed, and you will have a huge social problem. And it's not a question of security, it is a question of dignity. The people, they deserve to do something that is useful.
Agreed, Dr. Obegi. Yes, there is a social aspect to it, and maybe for once Lebanon right now is really starting a normal economy rather than having a very stagnant economy where all the money was parked in the banks at high interest rates. So this is maybe the time for people to start investing and using their capital that they have on hand.
Omar, I have a little remark about that, because I hear it very often that Lebanon did not have a real economy. It is completely wrong. We had a real economy, but it was in service. And unfortunately, the statistics that we had did not show that Lebanon was producing services much more than what was in the numbers, and was exporting for $15 billion of services outside of Lebanon. But as people are afraid now, they are not putting the money that they are earning in services in Lebanon. This is the problem. The problem is not that we did not have a real economy. We had a real economy. You are real, I'm real. I work in a bank. I think that I'm not unproductive. I don't think I'm a parasite. I think that the services are just as real as producing tomatoes or cucumbers.
So in terms of the CHO product, is there a specific criteria of industry that you are prioritizing to invest or lend to?
I think it should be open to everybody, but I guess that the central bank might say, begin by this region, maybe begin by a poor region first, in order on the one hand to understand better the mechanics of this product, and on the other hand to benefit to poorer people rather than the rich people who don't need an additional revenue. So I would expect this to be deployed progressively, but not everywhere in the same time. But it is the central bank who should put the criteria if they want.
If I may intervene.
Sorry, Dr.
Yes,
Obegi, one of the reasons why I asked you about the 1 year is that in your presentation, there is something that indicates that the depositor of real estate may also not only choose to give it to the bank, but choose to give it to a certain trader or debitor. Is that correct?
Yes, it is correct, but this is not an innovation, because it is already the case today. You can give your mortgage, in French it would be called caution morale. You can already give it to somebody for him to borrow. It was just to simplify this process that is good and not very much used. And since we have the apparatus for the classical CHO, then why not use it for something else? And
right.
Again, why less than a year? I said banks are able to manage that. They are not borrowing from each other for a period of more than a year. Usually they borrow from each other for a period less than a month. So they don't need very long maturities. And also there is a tax aspect, and we thought that since there are, as you know, tax registration taxes when you are doing mortgage, but there are no mortgages that are less than a year. So the state who is very keen on keeping its revenues would lose nothing if it is mortgages that are less than a year.
Thank you, Dr. Riad. Mr. Ali, would you like to give us a little input about real estate in times of crisis such as now and risk before we hand over to Mr. Raja Makarim?
Thank you. Actually, you know, of course, what happened has it had some positive impact for a certain period on the real estate sector, which was not at all expected. What happened is that since November, as we all know, and after what was happening after 17th of October and what happened with the banks and with the capital control mainly, and with the talk about the haircut since then, people, of course, rushed to
Mr. Ali, you're on mute.
بس لحظة, something happened.
Okay, am I unmuted?
Yes.
We're good, yes.
So people rushed to as I said, to try to salvage some of their money that they were afraid to lose with the banks due to the talks about the haircut. Definitely a big amount of sales happened during the last 7 months or 8 months till now. It's only about expectations rather than real numbers, but part of it that we are collecting from the banks themselves due to the value of operations that they have and the data that they can share between each others. There is about $4 or $4+ billion of sales of real estate during this 8 months. So definitely this thing helped a lot some of the developers, mainly to settle some of their dues and loans. And of course, the banks were very flexible during this period, of course, to interact with developers, to do some appropriate settlements and reschedulings and all this. Some others at a certain period of time also were continuing the completion of the unfinished works that they had in some of their projects. Although it was not easy time to do that, but some of them have to do it. We are one of those that we have some uncompleted work that we have to finish in order to deliver our goods. Now, the demand is still ongoing. It has been a little bit less than before, but not much less actually. And it's really a little bit fluctuating from a period to another, as in short period, like every sometimes there is this 1 or 2 weeks of high demand, then another couple of weeks of lower demand, and then comes back and then goes. So it's not really consistent for so many reasons. For the coming period, honestly, your question, what is the future of real estate in this crisis? That's, I think, a $10 billion question, since Mr. Obegi is asking now to raise 10 billion. This may be the $10 billion question, because I don't think anyone can really tell what will be the real future. But what I can say is that from very basic points that I already stated some, is that given the psychological effect of the real estate on people, that makes them feel that they preserve the value of their money in it. Number two, there is gradually a great decrease in supply, by the way, versus steady demand plus or minus. In addition to that, there is the cost of construction. The cost of construction has gone dramatically and crazy high. Now, for every dollar that we used to put in the cost of the construction before October 17, now it's costing us $2.5 to $3, as in dollar value again. But this is our dollar, which is that we have to talk about. So the cost of construction has gone dramatically high. And that's why there's no one will be able, I think, to go into a new development soon. As I said, not before many years ahead. That will also give a good advantage for property owners / developers who still have some good stock that may be liquidated during this period. That's mainly what I can say. I cannot predict more.
All right, perfect. So since we don't have so much time on our hands anymore, we have a special guest with us, Mr. Rajam Karim, who is also a real estate expert, and he's the CEO of Ramco Real Estate. We would like to listen to his input on the subject. And actually, I have a few questions to start with. First of all, Mr. Ali just mentioned about the future of the real estate in such crisis time. But I wanted to see, would you think that there is a good trade-off for international investors or maybe for diaspora to be involved in the future in this sector specifically? And would you think that for many outside today, even if they're not in the development side of the business, do you think it's a good time to actually buy in Lebanon?
Well, hello everyone. I'm sorry, I can answer this question, especially that Ali covered it well, and he gave good answers to the real estate present situation. I'm sorry I didn't follow Mr. Obegi's presentation to give an opinion, but I'm sorry, I'll have the chance to hear it later and comment. You asked me about the diaspora. I believe, and the only thing that makes me a little bit optimistic about Lebanon is the Lebanese diaspora, because we are so disappointed with our politicians. We are only left with one hope, is the Lebanese diaspora. I do believe that no matter what happens, no matter what the situation is, the Lebanese outside Lebanon has a dream to come back and own something in Lebanon. That's the traditional story that we all know. But now even more, I think, even though they got hit with, and I hope they will not really effectively be hit with their deposits. I hope really, and I think that there is going to be a happier solution than what we are all talking about. But I still believe in the Lebanese miracle, and the only miracle that can happen today is with the Lebanese diaspora. And I encourage the diaspora to really think of buying in Lebanon now, because it's still a good time to buy. And the prices are still acceptable, especially in lands, even though, as Ali mentioned, in the last few months, the apartments prices went up at least 20–25%.
On the local dollar, though.
Yes, on the local dollar. We are only talking local. The point is, everybody now is looking for the real dollar to be brought fresh money. I think this will take time before this happens. But already the present depositors that are here are offering 10 or 15% sweetener to any purchase they do to attract, to convince vendor to sell. So we have to keep a bit of fresh hope. in these depressive times and moments. But I think what Ali said and mentioned about the real estate market really summarizes the situation as it is now. We are finding it more difficult to find products for sale at the lower value. The valuation is going to be playing a big part because people don't know what their properties are worth. So I envisage that this is going to be a very active section of the industry, because everybody wants to know the real value of their products after these developments. So that's all I can tell you, in my opinion, for now. And I hope that Mr. Obegi's proposal will be, at least, somebody is thinking positively to find solutions to our problems. I'm pleased to hear that.
Thank you, Rashad.
Now we have two thinking positively, Mr. Obegi and you.
And hopefully you, by the end of this conversation.
It begins by 1, 2, and then everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Makaram.
Thank you,
Dr.
Rashad.
Obegi, would you like to give us your final thoughts on the discussion?
My final thoughts is I like very much what Raja said. I think that first of all, the diaspora is extremely important for Lebanon. It is important for several things, not only because they are sending money to Lebanon, but because they have created for the Lebanese a network that has almost no equal. I went to Paraguay, and in Paraguay there are a lot of Lebanese. Those Lebanese are ready to help other fellow Lebanese, even if they have not been to Lebanon or they are third generation. I think that this is a network that has huge value for Lebanon, and in order for this value to be really efficient, we need to create more links with them. We cannot just tell them send us money. We need to offer them something. We need to be much closer to them. I'm very optimistic. I think that whatever happens, Lebanon is going to not only to rise again, but is going to be much stronger than it was before. But there is this period of time where we have to do everything possible, because we cannot let people down. We have to help the people who are behind, because they are part of us. We cannot leave them behind.
Absolutely. Thank you. Mr. Ali?
We said a lot. We all hope, we are all optimistic, although maybe I had some negative intervention, being more realistic in what I'm feeling on the ground, really. Of course, I want to thank Mr. Obegi for his understanding, and as Raja said, also for his creative and optimistic ideas out of the box. I hope it will work. I'm not at all negative in principle, no, but I was a little bit conservative regarding the actual situation. I hope coming days will be better for all. And thank you again for inviting me for this panel.
Thank you, Mr. Ali, for joining us. And Dr. Obegi, again, a very interesting instrument and very interesting topic. And we're happy that we could get the financial point of view and the market expertise point of view from Mr. Ali. Tariq, would you like to add?
No, I just want to say that this has been a wonderful seminar as well. And I would say we would add it to the list of successful panels that we had with the London School of Economics alumni. And thank you, Omar, for being a great moderator, and I appreciate everyone who participated. This video is recorded, so we will be sharing the link very, very soon with everyone who was with us and those who could not make it. So thank you again, وإن شاء الله بنشوفكم بظروف أحلى وأيام أحلى.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.